The ultrasound photo slipped from Marcus Thorne's trembling fingers, floating to the concrete floor of his veterinary clinic like a death sentence. 22 weeks along. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days ago. His wife Cassandra wasn't pregnant. She'd been telling him for months that her periods were regular, that they should keep trying for their second child after losing their first to miscarriage 2 years prior. But here she was, carrying someone else's baby. Dr. Thorne? His assistant Elena's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. The Hendersons are here with Brutus for his hip surgery consult. Marcus stared at the ultrasound image, his trained eye immediately recognizing the familiar curve of a healthy fetus. His hands, steady enough to perform delicate spinal surgery on a Doberman, shook as he picked up the photo. The medical facility header read Westbridge Fertility Center, the same clinic where he and Cassandra had undergone fertility treatments after their loss. "Tell them I'll be right there," Marcus managed, his voice hoarse. The photo had fallen from Cassandra's purse when she'd rushed out that morning, claiming a sudden emergency at her marketing firm. But Marcus had seen her calendar. No meetings until 2 p.m. Another lie in what he was beginning to realize was an intricate web of deception. He slipped the ultrasound into his coat pocket and forced himself to focus on the German Shepherd waiting in exam room 3. But as he explained the surgical procedure to the worried owners, his mind kept returning to one devastating question. Whose baby was his wife carrying? That evening, Marcus sat in his truck outside Cassandra's office building watching the parking garage exit. At 7:23 p.m., her silver BMW emerged, but instead of turning toward home, she headed downtown. He followed at a distance, his veterinary training and animal behavior suddenly applied to tracking prey. She pulled into the valet circle of the Grandview Hotel. Marcus parked across the street and watched through his telephoto lens, a piece of equipment he'd purchased for wildlife photography, but now used as a weapon of discovery. Through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows, he saw Cassandra embrace a tall man with graying temples. The intimacy of their touch made Marcus's stomach lurch. But it was when the man's face turned toward the light that Marcus's world completely shattered. Dr. Richard Castellanos, Cassandra's ex-husband, the renowned fertility specialist who had helped them through their grief after the miscarriage, who had recommended the revolutionary new treatments that required Cassandra to visit his clinic twice weekly for the past 6 months. The same man who had insisted on handling their case personally, who had waived his substantial fees out of professional courtesy, who had been so understanding when Marcus couldn't always attend the appointments due to emergency surgeries. Marcus lowered the camera, bile rising in his throat. The pieces fell together with sickening clarity. The hormone treatments that made Cassandra nauseated, the experimental procedures that required privacy, the gradual distance in their marriage attributed to grief and medical stress. His wife hadn't just cheated on him. She'd become a surrogate for her ex-husband's child while lying to Marcus about trying to conceive their own. As he watched them disappear into the elevator, Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. The gentle veterinarian who saved animals' lives every day began to die, replaced by something colder, more calculating. If they wanted to play games with fertility and deception, he would show them what a real predator looked like. Marcus spent the next week documenting everything. His scientific background served him well as he built an irrefutable case. Photos of Cassandra entering the hotel, records of her business trips that coincided with prenatal appointments, bank statements showing monthly deposits from an LLC registered to Richard's practice. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. "Dr. Thorne?" Elena knocked on his office door. "There's a woman here to see you. Says it's about Dr. Castellanos." The woman who entered was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an embryologist who had worked at Westbridge Fertility Center until 6 months ago. Her hands shook as she sat down. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "I helped create the embryo your wife is carrying." Marcus set down his coffee mug carefully. "Explain." "Dr. Castellanos used his own genetic material and eggs from a donor who matched your wife's profile. The procedure was performed under experimental protocol guidelines, which is why there's no standard documentation. Your wife signed agreements stating she was acting as a gestational surrogate for an anonymous couple." "Anonymous couple?" "Dr. Castellanos and someone listed as patient X, but I recognized the genetic markers when I ran the preliminary screening. I quit when I realized what was happening." She pulled out a USB drive. "Everything's on here. The real contracts, the genetic testing results, the payment records. He's been using his position to create biological children with former patients. Your wife isn't the first." Marcus took the drive, his pulse quickening. Why come to me? Because I heard through colleagues that your wife was telling people she was trying to conceive with you. That means you don't know she's carrying her ex-husband's child. I couldn't live with being part of this anymore. As Sarah left, Marcus felt the final piece of his old self crumble away. They hadn't just betrayed him, they'd turned him into an unwitting accomplice in their biological fraud. He inserted the USB drive and began downloading the files. If Richard Castellanos wanted to play God with genetics and reproduction, Marcus would show him what happened when the wrong person got access to divine knowledge. The confrontation came 3 days later, but not where Cassandra expected. Marcus had spent 72 hours preparing, using skills he'd never thought he'd need outside the operating room. Veterinary medicine required precision, patience, and the ability to work with subjects who couldn't communicate their pain. As it turned out, those skills translated remarkably well to psychological warfare. He was waiting in Richard's private office when the doctor arrived for his 6 a.m. rounds. "Marcus!" Richard's startled laugh was too loud, too forced. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right with Cassandra?" "Sit down, Richard." Something in Marcus's tone made the fertility specialist freeze. The genial veterinarian Richard remembered from grief counseling sessions was gone, replaced by someone with predator's eyes. "Marcus, if this is about the treatments, I can explain." "I said, sit down." Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, but Richard dropped into his chair as if pushed. Marcus placed a manila folder on the desk. 22 weeks, 4 days. That's how far along the pregnancy is. Want to guess whose genetic material created that embryo? Richard's face went white. "I don't know what you think you've discovered. I think I've discovered that my wife is carrying your child while lying to me about trying to conceive mine. I think I've discovered that you've been using your position to manipulate vulnerable women into becoming surrogates for your offspring. I think I've discovered that you've committed medical fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." Marcus opened the folder, revealing printed genetic reports and bank statements. "But I haven't just discovered it, Richard. I've proven it." Richard reached for his phone, but Marcus was faster. The same reflexes that allowed him to restrain a panicked Great Dane now pinned Richard's wrist to the desk. "The police are already involved," Marcus said calmly. "Dr. Mitchell provided them with evidence of your illegal embryo program. The state medical board has been notified. Your malpractice insurance company received copies of these documents an hour ago." "You don't understand," Richard struggled against Marcus's grip. "Cassandra wanted this. She came to me." "Did she? Or did you manipulate a grieving woman who was desperate for another child?" Marcus released Richard's wrist, but didn't step back. "See, I've been doing research, talking to other patients. Doctor, Jennifer Walsh remembers being told her husband was infertile when he wasn't. Mrs. Angela Torres recalls you insisting on anonymous donor protocols when she'd requested full disclosure." Richard's breathing became rapid and shallow. "You can't prove intentional deception. Actually, I can." Marcus pulled out his phone and played a recording. Richard's voice filled the room, explaining to someone over the phone how to adjust medical records to support false diagnoses. "I've been wearing a wire for the past week, Richard. Amazing what people will say when they think they're safe." The office door burst open and 2 detectives entered, followed by a woman in a business suit. "Dr. Castellanos," the woman said, showing her badge. "I'm Detective Amy Rodriguez. You're under arrest for medical fraud, conspiracy, and violation of reproductive health laws." As the handcuffs clicked around Richard's wrists, Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. But this was just the beginning. Cassandra was waiting in Marcus's truck when he emerged from the medical building, her face streaked with tears. "They arrested Richard," she said, her voice breaking. "Marcus, please, let me explain." He got into the driver's seat without looking at her. "Explain what? That you've been carrying your ex-husband's child while pretending to try for mine? That you've been lying to me for 6 months? That you signed a surrogate contract without telling me?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Cassandra grabbed his arm. "The miscarriage. I was so broken, and Richard said he could help us." "He said the new procedures would guarantee a healthy pregnancy." "Using his sperm?" She flinched. "It was supposed to be anonymous donor material. I didn't know it was his until last month when the genetic screening came back. By then, I was too far along to..." "To what?" "Tell your husband the truth. I was scared. I knew you'd leave me and I couldn't lose you too. I thought maybe if we just raised the baby as ours, it wouldn't matter whose biological..." Marcus started the engine. "Get out." "What?" Get out of my truck. Walk home. Think about what you've done and figure out how you're going to explain it to a divorce attorney. Marcus, please. His hand shot out and gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. For a moment, Cassandra saw something that terrified her. The cold, calculating gaze of a predator who had just caught his prey. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, he said quietly. If you're still in my house after that, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. As she stumbled out of the truck, Marcus drove away without looking back. In his rearview mirror, he watched her collapse onto the sidewalk, finally understanding that her comfortable life was about to become a memory. But Marcus wasn't done. The arrest was just the opening move in a much larger game. Doctor. Sarah Mitchell met Marcus at a coffee shop downtown, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Richard's patient files, she said quietly. The ones that show the full scope of his operation. 12 women over 3 years, all told different stories about anonymous donors, all carrying his biological children. Marcus opened the envelope, scanning the names and dates. How did you get these? I still have friends at the clinic. They're horrified by what Richard was doing under their noses. The hospital board is conducting an internal investigation, but it's going to be a whitewash unless someone forces their hand. What do you mean? Sarah leaned forward. Richard's father-in-law sits on the hospital board. His practice generates millions in revenue for Westbridge Medical Center. They're going to try to contain this as a rogue doctor situation, maybe suspend his license for a year or two, then quietly reinstate him. Marcus studied the files, his mind working. Not if the victims know the truth. Exactly. But contacting them directly could be considered harassment. You'd need to be careful about how you approach this. What if they contacted me? Sarah raised an eyebrow. How would that happen? Marcus smiled, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Leave that to me. That evening, Marcus began making phone calls. His first was to Channel 7 news investigative reporter Jessica Chen, whose expose on medical fraud had won her a Peabody Award the previous year. Dr. Thorne, I remember you from the animal violence case last year. What can I do for you? I have a story that's going to destroy careers and save lives, Marcus said. How soon can we meet? The news story broke on a Thursday morning, leading the broadcast with the headline, Local fertility doctor accused of using own sperm in unauthorized procedures. Marcus watched from his clinic office as Jessica Chen stood outside Westbridge Medical Center, detailing the allegations against Richard Castellanos. The reporter had done excellent work, interviewing 3 other victims who had come forward after Marcus anonymously sent them copies of their medical files. By noon, the story had gone national. By evening, the hospital had suspended Richard without pay, and the state medical board had launched a formal investigation. But Marcus barely noticed the news coverage. He was too busy implementing the next phase of his plan. His phone rang. Dr. Thorne, this is Amanda Wells from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss your wife's pregnancy situation. Marcus had expected this call. In his anonymous tip to CPS, he'd included documentation showing that Cassandra was carrying a child conceived through fraudulent medical procedures, raising questions about the legal parentage and the child's welfare. Of course, Marcus said, I'm very concerned about the baby's well-being given the circumstances. We'll need to interview both you and your wife. There are complex legal issues here regarding surrogate pregnancies and parental rights. The child may need protective custody after birth until paternity and legal guardianship can be established. Perfect. Marcus had anticipated that Cassandra would try to claim the child was his, hoping to preserve her marriage and avoid the scandal. But now the state would require genetic testing, making her deception a matter of public record. After ending the call, Marcus opened his laptop and began composing an email to his attorney. If Cassandra wanted to play games with parentage and deception, he would use every legal tool available to ensure she faced the full consequences of her choices. The gentle veterinarian was gone. In his place was something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and the patience to destroy his enemies methodically. The confrontation at the house was inevitable, but Marcus had prepared for it carefully. He was packing the last of his belongings when Cassandra burst through the front door, her face wild with panic and rage. "You bastard!" she screamed, hurling her purse at his head. "You called CPS on me! They want to take my baby." Marcus ducked the purse and continued folding his shirts. "It's not your baby, Cassandra. It's Richard's. You're just the surrogate." "I'm the mother. I'm carrying this child." "No, You're a vessel that Richard used to create his offspring. There's a difference. Marcus zipped his suitcase and turned to face her. The court will determine legal parentage once the genetic tests are complete. Cassandra's composure cracked completely. She launched herself at him, clawing at his face with her nails. Marcus caught her wrists easily. The same steady hands that restrained thrashing animals were more than capable of controlling a hysterical woman. "Let me go," she gasped, struggling against his grip. Gladly. He released her so abruptly that she stumbled backward into the kitchen island. "But first, let's discuss your options." "My options?" Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal document. "Divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery and fraud. You have 3 choices. Sign them and accept a reasonable settlement, or fight me and lose everything." "You can't take my house. It's my house. My name on the deed, my money for the down payment. You contributed approximately nothing to the mortgage over our 5-year marriage." Marcus set the papers on the counter. "But I'm feeling generous. Sign, and you get $50,000 in 6 months to find somewhere else to live." "50,000? This house is worth 400? The house you're about to lose anyway when CPS determines you're an unfit mother and the courts investigate your fraudulent pregnancy. Oh, and when the IRS audits the unreported income you received for being Richard's surrogate." Marcus smiled coldly. "Did you think I wouldn't find the offshore account?" Cassandra went pale. "What offshore account?" "The one in the Cayman Islands where Richard deposited your payments. 200,000 so far, with more coming. Funny how that never made it onto our joint tax returns." He pulled out another document. "The third option is that you disappear, tonight. Leave the state, start over somewhere else, and never contact me again. In exchange, I don't turn this financial information over to federal authorities." "You're insane if you think I'm running away." "Then I guess you're choosing option 2. Marcus closed his briefcase. "Fight me. See what happens when I release all the evidence I've gathered to every news outlet in the state. See how you explain to your parents why their grandchild isn't actually their biological relation. See how you survive when Richard's other victims sue you as a co-conspirator in his fraud scheme." The blood drained from Cassandra's face as the full scope of her situation became clear. "You've been planning this," she whispered, "from the moment I found that ultrasound photo. You made me an unwitting participant in your deception, Cassandra. Now you get to face the consequences." Marcus walked out of his former home and drove to the extended stay hotel where he'd been living for the past week. But instead of going to his room, he sat in the parking lot and made a phone call. "Detective Rodriguez, this is Dr. Marcus Thorne. I have additional information about the Castellanos case." "What kind of information?" "Evidence that Richard and my wife weren't just engaged in reproductive fraud. They were running a systematic scheme to defraud insurance companies and exploit vulnerable women. I have financial records, recorded conversations, and documentation of at least 8 more victims." There was a pause. "Dr. Thorne, I need to ask, are you seeking revenge against your wife?" Marcus considered the question. "I'm seeking justice, Detective. There's a difference." "Is there? Because what you've described sounds like you've been conducting a private investigation for weeks without informing law enforcement. That could be considered obstruction if you've been withholding evidence. I've been gathering evidence as a concerned citizen and wronged party. Everything I've discovered has been provided to appropriate authorities as soon as it was verified." Marcus kept his voice level, professional. "But if you're not interested in prosecuting a major medical fraud case, I'm sure the FBI's white-collar crime unit will be." Dr. Thorne, I think we need to meet in person. There are aspects of this case that concern me. Such as the fact that you seem to have anticipated every legal move before it happened. Such as the fact that your evidence packages are almost too perfectly organized. Such as the suspicious timing of various investigations all launching simultaneously. Marcus felt a cold smile cross his face. "Sounds like efficient police work to me, Detective. It sounds like someone with medical training and scientific methodology applied those skills to destroying people's lives. Only guilty people, Detective Rodriguez. Only guilty people." After ending the call, Marcus sat in his truck watching the hotel's neon sign flicker against the night sky. Detective Rodriguez was right. He had been systematic in his approach to justice. But she was wrong about one thing. This wasn't just about destroying guilty people. It was about sending a message that actions had consequences, that betrayal carried a price, and that some people shouldn't be underestimated. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. City Park, come alone. R. Richard." Apparently, jail had provided him with access to contraband phones and a desire for negotiation. Marcus deleted the text and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he would sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The hunt was far from over. Marcus arrived at City Park 30 minutes early, positioning himself on a bench with clear sightlines in all directions. His veterinary work had taught him to anticipate unpredictable behavior from cornered animals, and Richard Castellanos was definitely cornered. At exactly 3 p.m., a figure approached from the Eastern Trail. But it wasn't Richard. Dr. Thorne? The young man looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. I'm Danny Torres, Dr. Castellanos' research assistant. He asked me to give you this. He handed Marcus an envelope and immediately turned to leave. Wait, Marcus called. Tell me something, Danny. Did you know what Richard was doing with the Surrogate program? The young man froze. I can't talk about that. You can't, or you won't. Look, man, I just run lab tests and file paperwork. Whatever Dr. C was doing with those patients, it wasn't my business. Marcus stood and walked closer. But you knew something was wrong, didn't you? That's why you're so nervous. Danny's face crumpled. He said it was all legal. The surrogate contracts, the anonymous donors, all of it. But last month I overheard him on the phone talking about maintaining plausible deniability and keeping the wives happy. That's not normal medical terminology. What else did you hear? Something about insurance fraud. And he mentioned your name specifically, said you were too trusting and wouldn't figure it out until it was too late. Danny pulled out his phone. I recorded some of it. I was going to take it to the hospital administration, but then you went to the police and everything blew up. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Let me hear it. The recording was damning. Richard's voice clearly describing how he'd manipulated multiple women into carrying his biological children while deceiving their husbands about the genetic material being used. Danny, are you willing to testify about what you witnessed? I don't know, man. Dr. C said if anyone talked, he'd make sure they never worked in medicine again. He's got connections everywhere. He's facing federal charges and medical license revocation. His connections aren't going to help him now. Marcus handed Danny his business card. Think about it. The right thing to do, or protecting someone who's been using you as an accomplice to fraud. After Danny left, Marcus opened Richard's envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. Warehouse District, 1247 Industrial Boulevard, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone or Cassandra pays the price. Marcus stared at the message, his mind racing. Richard was out on bail, desperate and apparently resorting to threats. The smart thing would be to call Detective Rodriguez immediately. Instead, Marcus pulled out his phone and began making different preparations. If Richard Castellanos wanted to escalate this confrontation beyond legal channels, Marcus was more than willing to accommodate him. The warehouse district at night was a maze of shadows and empty buildings, perfect for the kind of confrontation that left no witnesses. Marcus parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using skills he'd learned during his military service before veterinary school. The address led to a defunct pharmaceutical storage facility, its loading docks empty and windows boarded. Marcus circled the building twice, noting exit routes and potential ambush points before finally approaching the main entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, the warehouse was lit by a single spotlight illuminating the center of the floor. Cassandra sat tied to a chair in the circle of light, duct tape covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror above the restraints. Right on time, Richard's voice echoed from the darkness. I wondered if you'd actually come. Marcus stepped into the light, keeping his hands visible. Let her go, Richard. This is between us. Is it? Richard emerged from the shadows, holding what appeared to be a medical scalpel. See, I've been thinking about your systematic approach to destroying my life. Very impressive work, Marcus. Thorough, professional. Almost like you've done this before. I haven't. No? Then how did you know exactly which laws I'd broken? How did you anticipate every legal vulnerability? How did you coordinate with reporters, police, and regulatory agencies so efficiently? Richard moved closer, the blade glinting in the spotlight. That kind of precision suggests experience. Marcus remained motionless. It suggests I'm smarter than you gave me credit for. Or it suggests you're not the grieving, betrayed husband you pretend to be. Maybe you're something much more dangerous. Behind Richard, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. He forced himself not to react, keeping his attention focused on the man with the knife. What do you want, Richard? I want you to call off the dogs, the reporters, the investigators, the federal prosecutors. Make it all go away, and Cassandra lives. And if I refuse, Richard pressed the scalpel against Cassandra's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. She screamed against the tape, thrashing in the chair. Then you'll learn what it feels like to lose someone you love. I don't love her anymore, Marcus said calmly. She betrayed me, remember? Carry your child while lying to me for months. Why would I risk my life for someone like that? Richard's confident expression faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Think about it, Richard. Everything I've done has been calculating and methodical. Do you really think I'm here to rescue the wife who destroyed my life? Or do you think I might have a different agenda? The movement in the shadows resolved into uniformed figures. Police officers moving into position around the warehouse perimeter. Richard spun around, finally understanding the trap. You called the cops. I called them before I left home, told them a desperate man was threatening to eliminate his former patient to silence her testimony. Marcus smiled coldly. They've been listening to this entire conversation through the wire I'm wearing. You're lying. Marcus pulled open his jacket, revealing the recording device taped to his chest. 3 felony charges, Richard. Kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and making terroristic threats. That's life in prison, even if you beat the medical fraud charges. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the warehouse as police vehicles surrounded the building. A bullhorn crackled to life. Dr. Castellanos, drop the weapon and step away from the hostage. Richard looked around wildly, finally realizing he'd been outmaneuvered from the beginning. This was all a setup. From the moment you sent me that threatening note, did you really think I'd walk into an obvious trap without backup? Marcus stepped backward as SWAT officers poured through the entrances. You're not dealing with some heartbroken husband, Richard. You're dealing with someone who's been planning your destruction for weeks. As Richard was tackled to the ground and cuffed, Marcus approached Cassandra and began cutting her restraints. She looked up at him with gratitude and confusion. Why? She whispered as he removed the tape from her mouth. Because regardless of what you've done, you don't deserve to die for it. But don't mistake this for forgiveness, Cassandra. The divorce papers are still on the kitchen counter, and I still want you out of my life. As the police led Richard away, Detective Rodriguez approached Marcus with a skeptical expression. Convenient timing, she said. Almost like you knew he'd escalate to violence. I know desperate people do desperate things. Richard was facing the loss of everything: career, reputation, freedom. It was logical that he'd try to eliminate the source of his problems. Or logical that someone would manipulate him into a situation where he'd commit additional crimes, ensuring he could never recover from this scandal. Marcus met her gaze. Steadily. Are you accusing me of something, Detective? I'm observing that you seem to have anticipated every move in this case with remarkable accuracy. That suggests either incredible luck or careful planning. I prefer to think of it as justice, Detective Rodriguez. Richard Castellanos destroyed multiple families through his fraud and manipulation. Tonight, he got what he deserved. As Marcus walked away from the warehouse, he felt a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. Richard would spend decades in prison. Cassandra would face financial ruin and social disgrace. The victims would get justice and closure. But most importantly, anyone who might consider betraying Marcus Thorne in the future would understand exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. The gentle veterinarian was gone forever. In his place was something much more dangerous, a predator who had learned to hunt with surgical precision. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the courtroom as the judge read the final divorce decree. Cassandra sat at the defendant's table, visibly pregnant and alone. Her parents had disowned her after learning the truth about the baby's parentage. Her few friends had distanced themselves from the scandal. Richard's conviction for kidnapping and assault had made her complicit by association in the eyes of many. Dr. Thorne, the judge said, the court finds in your favor on all counts. The marriage is dissolved, with cause being adultery and fraud. Mrs. Thorne forfeits any claim to marital assets due to her deception regarding the pregnancy. Marcus nodded professionally, showing no emotion. But inside, he felt the cold satisfaction of a predator whose hunt had concluded successfully. Cassandra approached him as they left the courthouse. Marcus, please, I have nowhere to go. The baby will be here in 6 weeks, and— The baby that isn't mine? Marcus interrupted. The child you conceived with your ex-husband while lying to me for months? That baby? I made a mistake, I know that now. But I'm begging you. You're begging the wrong person, Cassandra. Try Richard. Oh wait, he's serving 25 to life for kidnapping and assault. Maybe try his father-in-law, the hospital board member who tried to cover up the scandal. Oh wait, he resigned in disgrace and is facing ethics charges. Tears streamed down Cassandra's face. How can you be so cruel? I loved you. No, you used me. There's a difference. Marcus walked toward his truck, then stopped and turned back. But I'll give you one piece of advice, Cassandra. When that baby is born, don't put my name on the birth certificate. DNA tests are mandatory now in surrogate cases, and perjury is a federal crime. As he drove away, Marcus's phone rang. It was Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Marcus, I wanted to let you know. The medical board just released their final report on Richard's case. 12 confirmed victims, over $2 million in insurance fraud, and systematic violation of informed consent protocols. They're recommending criminal charges against the entire fertility center administration. Good. What about the victims? Class action lawsuit filed yesterday. The attorney thinks they'll get substantial settlements from both Richard's malpractice insurance and the hospital's liability coverage. You should consider joining. You have as much claim as anyone. Marcus considered this. No, I got what I wanted. Justice? Something like that. After ending the call, Marcus drove to his new veterinary clinic across town. The scandal had actually increased his business. Many people admired his methodical approach to exposing corruption and protecting victims. He'd become something of a local hero, the wronged husband who'd brought down a corrupt doctor through careful investigation and legal action. But as he performed surgery on an injured German shepherd that afternoon, Marcus reflected on what he'd really become. The gentle man who'd entered marriage with love and trust was gone. In his place was someone harder, more calculating, someone who understood that the world was full of predators and prey. He'd learned to be the apex predator. The dog on his operating table whimpered as it came out of anesthesia, and Marcus stroked its head gently. Animals were honest in their needs and motivations. Unlike humans, they didn't deceive or manipulate or betray trust. Maybe that's why he preferred their company now. As the sun set through his clinic windows, Marcus finished his notes and prepared to go home to his empty house. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve with surgical precision. But tonight he would sleep peacefully, knowing that justice had been served and that anyone who might consider crossing him in the future would think twice. The hunt was over. The predator was satisfied, for now.